Hello, friends. Welcome back to How to Talk to Weirdos, where we talk about communicating with people who are different than you. Since we're all unique, that's pretty much everyone. When someone has a different style of communication, they can seem like a weirdo. And if they seem like that to you, you probably seem that way to them. As I like to say, everyone is kind of a weirdo. We're going to talk about some of the assumptions we make and other pitfalls of communication so that we can all improve. There is a lot to cover, so let's get started. Welcome back to How to Talk to Weirdos. Today we have a very special guest, Michael Whitehouse, and he's also known as the guy who knows a guy. I think I need a title. That sounds like a pretty good one. He is a networking concierge, author, and a podcaster. He's become so successful at networking that now he not only coaches others on some of the techniques he's learned, but will also help people by making strategic connections for them all around the world. He wrote a book and has a podcast called The Guy Who Knows a Guy. Thank you. He has other podcasts as well and even offers podcast production services, which is yet one more way in which he helps people connect. So in short, Michael is a connector. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It is great to have you. You held up the book for people who are watching this. Tell us a little bit more about it and what spurred you to write it.
Sure. So the story I share in the book is that I started networking the day before I moved into my apartment here in Southeast Connecticut. I was moving into New London County, Connecticut, which you probably never heard of unless you have some involvement with submarines, in which case you've been through here, because I live in the submarine capital of the world. I happened to land here completely by accident, nothing to do with submarines at all, confuses people a great deal. My wife had left her job, the apartment was attached to her job, and we had 30 days to move. She knew someone who was a manager of an apartment in town that could get us in fast enough so we wouldn't be homeless, and that was the only criteria we needed to make it a good place to live. So at the time, I did not have a job. I had a vague business idea. I was going to do consulting of some kind. I didn't have a network. I really had nothing to offer except my charm and good looks. So the night before we moved into our apartment, I had been told about the local Chamber of Commerce and their business after hours, and I was told you should go to them. So I said, okay. So I went, started meeting people, and again, nothing to offer, so all I could do was make connections to the people I already met. And so I went to every networking event I could find, total ignorance on fire, and I'd talk to people and try to figure out who I could introduce them to and how I could help them out, and it worked really well, and in retrospect, I now know it's because most people at networking events are nervous and awkward and don't know what to do. So having someone who's like, oh, have you met Jeremy? Let me introduce you. Even if you're not the person they need to meet, it still got them to be able to say, I've now met two people. I had a successful night without having to walk up to any strangers. So I did that. I started introducing people. I went from step to step. I then sold cars. I sold printing. I sold a few other things. And through that, I ended up meeting people in different towns and making connections across. New England's a funny place because people don't cross running water. I joke that New Englanders are like vampires. They don't like to cross rivers. So people, the big shots in Groton don't know the big shots in New London right across the river. It's an 8-minute drive, but they don't know each other. So I could introduce them, and they'd be like, oh, wow, a big shot. I'd like to know them. And now I'm the big connector, and they're like, wow, Michael, you're like the guy who knows a guy. They didn't say that until I named the book. But and I wrote the book because I was a print salesman. And that's all people thought of me as. And I thought, well, if I was an author, then I'd have the esteem of being an author and not just a salesman. And I know a bunch of stuff about networking. I've met all these people. I've gotten all my jobs through networking. I've gotten a lot of sales through networking. Why don't I just write down what I know and publish it? And this was back when it was Create Space, not Kindle Direct Publishing. But I published it. I put it out. Started putting it in raffles at Chambers of Commerce and giving it out to people. I sold a few copies. Really thought I was giving it out. And people were like, ooh, you're an author. Your picture's on it and your name's on it. How cool is that? Because how many authors do most people know? And one thing led to another, and I eventually went from being the author of The Guy Who Knows a Guy to The Guy Who Knows a Guy. And then in 2020, I did it all over again because everything went online, and I said, New London County is a small county, 250,000 people, not the center of things. I wonder who I could find if I meet online. Started going to Rotary meetings online, started going to BNI meetings online, and just started exploring the world through Zoom and discovered this whole new, the online business industry, coaching industry, and started making connections there, which is leading to huge things, which is culminating now with this event called JV Connect that I'm running in December, which I believe all the projections show may be the largest virtual networking event in the online business space that's ever been created.
So JV doesn't stand for junior varsity then, does it?
Yeah, joint venture.
Joint venture. Oh, that's a lot better.
Yes.
So you talk about people not wanting to go far. I live in Rhode Island, which is about the size of somebody's thumb. And, if you have to cross a bridge, then people will jokingly say, oh, I don't have my passport, so I can't go.
Yes. Yes.
So I completely get that. So you started networking without a product to sell and just pure networking. I love it. So bold.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is, by not having any of those assets, all my weaknesses were strengths. Not all of them, but most of my weaknesses were strength. Not having anything to sell meant I couldn't sell anything. I couldn't be the pushy salesman at the networking event. I had nothing to sell. I had nothing to even ask for. Not knowing anyone meant that I knew I didn't know anyone. A lot of people, if you grew up around here, well, you think you know people because you know all your friends and you know this person, you know that person. You're like, I know a bunch of people. But then, hey, I need to talk to the mayor of New London. Do you know him? No, I don't know. Hey, I need to talk to a great tree service. Do you know one? No, I don't know one of those. And you don't know how to grow because you never worked the muscle of building a network. When you know you have nothing, you know you have nothing. And then that's when you're going to build it. Most people have just enough so they think they're connected. And then when they need to get a job or find a vendor or get a solution, they don't have it and they don't know how to lean on their network to get to the network behind them and behind them.
So you knew what you didn't know. That's very powerful.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of engineers and other people who are technical, and then they get to a point where they need to start doing networking. A lot of them are just terrified of it. And one piece of advice I give them, especially the introverts, is everyone there wants to talk to you. If that person is an introvert, then you are saving them from being alone. If that person's an extrovert, they want to talk and they're happy to let you listen. So
yes, yeah, right, absolutely. And one thing I've tried to do as well, thinking about the theme of this show, is I'm glad you reminded me of the engineers. So in addition to being a very serious business person, as you can tell by my very serious button-down shirt that I'm wearing, I'm also a bit of a geek. My first business was a game store, and
nice.
So I always look for unique axes to connect people along. And one of the things I did was I ran an event, and I'll probably run it again, a summit called Entreprenerd. So it is an overlap of entrepreneurs and nerds, geeks, fun folks. I had a naming convention that you'll probably appreciate if you have any bit of geekiness, which is the first one was Entrepreneur Episode 4, A New Summit, and then Entrepreneur Episode 5, The Summit Strikes Back, Entrepreneur Episode 6, Return of the Summit, Entrepreneur Episode 1, The Phantom Summit. So
I'm sensing a theme there somehow.
Huh?
I'm sensing a theme.
Yeah. Yes, we had a lot of fun with that. And the cool thing was, it was a serious business conference or summit. We were talking about business topics, but in geeky terms. So one of our speakers talked about Jedi versus Sith marketing techniques. And
nice.
Her regular talk is manipulative versus authentic marketing, which is replaced with Jedi and Sith.
Yeah.
Apparently Star Wars is the easiest thing to just drop in words to replace other words. But, and so people would be themed. Some people wore cosplay. It was it's a virtual summit, but they wear cosplay or they have themed backgrounds and it was just a lot of fun because business doesn't have to be all super serious all the time. You can have fun with it, especially in entrepreneurship. Now, if you work for Electric Boat, then you probably need to be all serious all the time because it's a serious company that has government contracts and does serious things and if Armageddon comes, they probably are responsible for it. Which that's pretty serious. But if you're an entrepreneur, if you own your own business, you don't have to do it like everyone else. And that's why you're an entrepreneur. And also probably why people want to hire you, because you don't sound like everyone else. If you've got the shirt and the tie and the jacket and you're very serious and I'm an MBA, you sound like everyone else. So why should I hire you and not the other bigger company that's been around longer? But if you've got some niche like I'm a geek, or I'm into basket weaving, or we do our meetings on boats, or something, that's what sets people apart. People want that connection.
So is that one of the techniques you learned about networking, or are there some other things you can share with us all?
So that one actually was so one term I often use is tactical laziness, but I think I'd call that more tactical stubbornness. That I just never bothered to try to fit in. I always decided the people, cause I've never worked in corporate. I worked in sales, which is the closest corporate I've been, cars, insurance, stuff like that. But I've never worked in like a corporate office where there was the corporate politics and you had to go along to get along, and otherwise you never get a raise. I never had to do that. And now, of course, I'm in full entrepreneurship. So now, if you don't like me, you don't have to talk to me. So, I've never chosen to try to fit in. I was like, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. This is what I want to do. This is the way I do things. And what I've found is, far from it having a cost of people saying, oh, I don't like the way you're saying, which does. There's plenty of people who just exit my universe. But it has a massive benefit, because very rapidly when people meet me or get on my email list or come to my events or whatever, they're like, you're not like everyone else. You're just so there. 10 minutes in, I know you. I'm not trying to peel back the layers of the onion and be like, oh yeah, what do you really mean? What's your real objective? I mentioned I'm running this event, JV Connect, in December, and I'm going to be sending out an email to my list in a couple days, which lays out the financial plan for the event. How many times you're being sold something, and they say, here's our business plan. Now you should buy a ticket. Because usually if you know their plan, you'd be like, oh, I get it. So these people are getting ripped off, and these people are this, and your purpose is to screw all these people and make the money this way. I believe if I'm running something, if you were to hack into my computer and read all my emails and know everything about the program, you would want to buy it more rather than less. And I think that's the better way to do business. I don't want to be hiding my cards, especially if it's an event about collaboration. So, and it's so much easier if I can just say, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's the ticket price. For example, the business model is based on the prices going up continuously. So it's the ticket price starts at 30, then 50, then 70, 90. The closer you get, the more it costs. So the price never goes down. The longer you wait, the higher the price gets. I'm completely transparent about that, because why do I want to do that? Is it for me? Sort of. I want a successful event. It's because people need a reason not to wait. Mm-hmm. So I'm incentivizing not waiting. But if you want to buy your ticket at $90 in November, okay, that's fine. But I don't need to have tricks about like, oh, no, I'm just giving you a free PDF. Wait, there's actually a 5-day challenge. Wait, there's actually a webinar. Wait, there's a 3-day event. I don't need to do that. And the more transparent you are, people can tell if you're holding something back. So getting into the networking, people can tell if you're holding something back. It feels wrong, but they don't know what. So you may be holding back that you're a geek and don't want anyone to know. But they don't know what you're lying about. They don't know what you're hiding. They just know you're hiding something. Maybe you're a con man. Maybe you're a serial killer. Maybe you have highly contagious Ebola. They don't know. So when you don't know and there's just kind of like uncertainty, that's when the reptilian brain takes over. And that's the fight, flight, survival part. And it just says, watch out for this guy. I don't know why, but I'm getting a red flag. Just back off. And when you're first meeting someone, it's easier to back off than to engage. So you need to give people a reason to engage. So any reason to back off, any red flag, they're done. So the more authentic you can be, the more you're just you, the better those connections are going to be. And what I've found over and over again is that very often the easier, more direct, more honest, transparent way is the better way. And that it's more important to do something that's in authenticity and integrity to yourself and your values than to achieve the success somebody might say. So, for example, I run virtual summits. I could charge my speakers. A lot of virtual summits do. I don't. It doesn't feel right because I don't know if I'll deliver the value. Some get amazing value. Some make tens of thousands of dollars off my stage. Some have a pretty good time and meet some people. I don't know who's going to be who. So I don't want to charge everyone. It doesn't feel right. I'd rather pay my bills driving Uber than charge my speakers if I can't be absolutely sure they'll get that value. So I don't. And some people say, well, you're missing out and you need to be more, abundance minded and more open to receiving. But I don't think that's the case there, because I don't want to take if I can't deliver. That's not an authenticity to me. And people can feel that. And I'm confident that that will come back when I do find, well, I have found it. It's JV Connect, that program running. That's when, that's going to really pay off. Whereas the people are like, oh, it's just a little thing. Oh, I'm charging $100 for this program. I know it doesn't deliver for most people, but it's only $100. Because I've heard people say it's only $5,000. Yeah, our program has a 20% success rate, but it's only $5,000. Well, that's because they're $1 million business. But there's people mortgaging, putting a loan on their car to be able to take that program. And if they knew it at 20% success rate, you ruin people's lives that way. So I don't want to be that.
No, that's great. And being authentic, I think, in networking, or I got divorced 5 years ago or so. Mm-hmm. And in dating, what I found is being authentic, is so much more fun. Yeah. Whether it's networking or just meeting a new person, because you can just let go and then be yourself. And it's so much more enjoyable. The other thing is it's a built-in filter. So you were saying there are some people who aren't going to like you because you're not a stuffed shirt and you're not formal and good. You don't really want to work with those people anyway. Yep. So you get to filter out the people you want and have more fun with the people you do want.
Yep. Yeah, one of the first things I learned getting into the space was someone taught me about email list building. And she taught me the phrase bless and release, referring to unsubscribes. Because some people are like, oh my God, someone unsubscribed my list. Oh, they hate me. Oh, I screwed up. My audience is fleeing. And she said, bless and release. If they unsubscribe, then they're not for you. They don't. Now, what I have found is sometimes they unsubscribe because I shared something inauthentic. I promoted a partner and I used their swipe copy. I just cut and paste their swipe copy. I got lazy, and a bunch of people unsubscribed. That's not them leaving because they don't like me and who I am. That's them leaving because they don't like this other thing I put on my list that isn't who I am. That's bad. But if I'm sharing my stuff and I'm telling my stories and I'm doing it the way I want to do it and they leave, okay, there's the door. Go ahead. There's 2,400 more where that came from. But yeah, it's exactly that the right people will opt in, the wrong people will opt out. You don't have to, and then that means I don't end up on calls with people who don't align with me. Because they never get that far. They see my emails, they see my stuff, they're like, who's this weirdo? That's the end of it.
Weirders are okay, just so you know.
And if they're judging weirdos, then
who wants
there's
them?
The door.
So on the topic of weirdos, one thing that caught my eye or ear is that you had a podcast called Neurodiversity Superpowers podcast. Yes. Yep. Can you talk a little bit more about that and explain what neurodiversity means?
Sure. And I think this falls into the tactical stubbornness category. So neurodiversity is it's a term that means different things to different people. But it broadly means that a neurodiverse person is one whose brain does not work in the standard configuration. The way they interact with the world is somewhat different than others. The term initially was used to refer to autism, and then it was expanded to include ADHD, and then it was expanded to include dyslexia, and then it was expanded to include almost everything. Yep. So it's sort of broad, it's nebulous. It's one of those things where the closer you try to look at the boundary lines of like what is and isn't autistic, what isn't dyslexic, the closer you look at the boundary lines, the fuzzier they get. So there's some people like, okay, that person is definitely not autistic, and that person is definitely autistic. But then there's always people like, well, they're kind of a little ADHD and a bit autistic, and there's also what I call envirogenic ADHD, which is if you are under stress and near burnout and overwhelmed and overstimulated, you start to get a lot of ADHD-like symptoms. So a lot of things I talk about regarding ADHD apply to simply stressed out, overwhelmed people who never had ADHD, but now they're having trouble paying attention and having trouble staying focused and whatnot.
So by stressed out and overwhelmed people, you mean 98% of the people in America?
Yes. Yeah. So
got it.
So us ADHD folks, we grew up with it. So we got used to it. And it's like, I think it's think the movie is called Blindness, where suddenly everyone goes blind, and one of the characters was always blind, and so the one who was always blind is guiding everyone else because they know how to use a cane and use their ears and whatnot. Us ADHD people, we've always had it, so we adapted to it and all this. Whereas a lot of people didn't have it. They got through school okay, they got into the workforce or business or whatever, and now they're overwhelmed, and now they have to split their attention and be ADHD-like, and they've never done it before. So there's a lot that can be learned. But the way I came up with the podcast was, for the longest time, I thought I had a disability, attention deficit disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met a man named Dan Mangetta. I hosted him on my podcast. And during that season of the podcast, I was hosting highly successful people and basically asking them, how the heck did you do it? Because I knew they were successful, I knew I was pretty smart, and I wanted to find out what was different between me and them so I could close that difference. And so I asked Dan the question, what makes you awesome? And he said, Asperger's. And I said, that is an unusual answer.
Yeah.
He explained that his autistic brain structure allowed him to see things, see patterns other people didn't see. So where regular people would look at, a dirty warehouse, they'd see a dirty warehouse. He looked at a dirty warehouse and he saw the flows of commerce around the world and would immediately see opportunities. And even today, he'll look at a business plan that would take most people hours to pour through and figure out this is profitable, this needs to be fixed, whatever. He can go through in a couple minutes and just boom, he sees all the patterns and flows right there in it. And within 5, 10, 15 minutes, he can say, yes, this is investable. No, it's not. You have to do this first. He just sees it. And now what he doesn't see is facial expressions, although I think he's trained himself at this point. But the natural, like the co-processing unit in the brain that tells you that this facial expression means this without thinking about it, the autistic brain doesn't have. It has this seeing patterns thing instead. But if you can learn to compensate the weakness, I learned from him, and leverage the strength, then if you're Kal-El from Krypton and you land under a yellow sun, then you are a superhero. If you land on a planet, if you land in a kryptonite quarry or storage facility, I don't think it can be quarried. Anyway, if you land in a kryptonite storage facility, you're a cripple, and no one will ever know you're a superhero because you're always weak and struggling because you're surrounded by kryptonite. So if you can find a way to not live in the kryptonite storage facility, you're a superhero. And so once Dan made me aware of that phenomenon, I started looking around and seeing it other places. And I'd hear other successful entrepreneurs say, oh, yeah, I've got dyslexia. We've probably all heard about dyslexia as a much higher appearance rate among billionaires. The rate of dyslexia among billionaires is much higher than in general population.
Right.
And I always thought it was just because, dyslexia is like running with rocks on your back, and so you get stronger and you're more adaptable, which is some of it, but turns out not to be all of it. And so as I started hearing about this, I said, I want to explore this concept, and I want to take other people to the epiphany that I had, which took me 6 months. But I suddenly had this epiphany one day of like, wait a minute, what if I have a superpower and I don't have a disability? I was looking at everyone else's, like, oh, that's cool, you have a superpower. Oh, you have a superpower, you have a... And suddenly, and it took me an embarrassingly long time to say, wait, what if my ADHD is not, in fact, a disability? What if it is, in fact, a superpower? Because it's the reason why I've never worked a corporate job. Because I don't have the attention span to go through the hiring process and to deal with the bosses and all that, which seemed like a negative. But I wouldn't be here if I'd gotten a corporate job. It kept me out of that trap, which I now realize was a good thing. It took me a while to realize that. It kept me out of that trap and kept me free for the opportunities that I was meant for. So I launched the podcast to collect stories from successful people who are neurodiverse, whether it's ADHD, autism, dyslexia. There's a coach I talked to who he teaches people to be more dyslexic, which sounds weird.
Yeah, it does.
But what they've discovered is one of the things about dyslexia includes peripheral thinking. So dyslexics will put together, most of us, you see a point here and a point here, you put them together. But dyslexic, you see a point here and a point here, and they'll put them together. And that's why, Richard Branson is quite dyslexic. And he is fantastic at being like, oh, you know where the next opportunity is? Soda. Let's make $100 million selling soda. That seems good. He just sees the next thing because his mind sees things a different way. It also means he sees words a different way and has trouble reading them. But, there's ways around that. He can see opportunities that are worth hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. But so those are, common ones, but also talk to someone with aphantasia, which is the inability to visualize vividly. So, if I say pink elephant, you picture an elephant that is pink, probably. If you say pink elephant to him, he hears the words pink elephant. He's aware of elephants are large animals in Africa. Pink is a mix of red and white. He is describing an elephant, an animal in Africa that is a very light red color. But he doesn't actually see it.
Huh.
The superpower there is it means he doesn't fear the future.
Oh, really?
The reason entrepreneurs get scared of the future is we picture our house being foreclosed. We picture,
Right.
starving in the street with a cup. He can't picture that. He also can't picture the other side, but he can picture the numbers. He can be like, 1 million is a very large number. I like that number. It's better than 800,000. Let's work towards that larger number. But
Interesting.
He can't vividly picture the fear. So he doesn't have the fear. He just does it. So I collected these stories, and it was designed to be a limited run podcast. Because I did 23 interviews. It made its point. I can now focus on other things. But I made it because I wanted people who were growing up with ADHD or what I call high-functioning autism, although that's apparently an unpopular term. That I could do an entire podcast about the terminology around autism, how that's a train wreck. But because there's just no language to discuss the condition and the various nuances of it without confusing and or offending. But for the people who are super now, there's plenty of people. There are people with neurological differences that are profound enough that they're not superpowers,
right?
Because the trade-off is just too great. Nonverbal autism. It doesn't matter if they can see the mysteries of the universe. They can't communicate them. It's very difficult to make anything of that. But for a lot of people out there, especially in school. I always say ADHD isn't a learning disability, it's a teaching disability. Most teachers can't teach it, and the kids get bored because the teachers are bad teachers. And the teachers say, well, it's the student's job to pay attention. It's your job not to be boring and to teach them something interesting they need to know. So a kid who goes through 12 years of being told, you're inattentive, you've got a disability, you're defective. And after 12 years of that, it's really hard for them to say, I'm going to do great things. Especially because they've been steered towards a job direction which is completely unsuited to them. So they've been told you're a loser your whole life, and then they're being pointed towards the exact wrong thing for them to do, where they will then fail, confirming they're a loser. So my hope is that people will stumble across the podcast and listen to those stories and say, "Oh, I'm not a loser." I think it was Einstein who said if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will forever spend its life thinking it's defective.
There'll be no good fish then.
Yeah, but you put the fish in the water, compare it to the monkey. Fish in the water, monkey in the water. Now who's the winner?
Yeah.
And so I want to, show the fish they should be in the water, the monkeys they should be in the trees, and the cheetahs they should be on the plains. And that's the purpose of the podcast, is to share these stories of not just, because so many of the stories are like, and after working really hard, they were able to have a normal dating relationship. And after working really hard, they were able to get a regular job and support themselves. That is not an inspiring story to me. That is a horror story to me. Wait, I can work really hard to get what other people get normally? That sounds terrible. That's depressing. So I want to say, and after discovering his superpower, he made $22 million.
Nice.
Oh, okay, cool. So I'm going to work harder. It's going to be harder, but I'm going to win harder. And that's what neurodiversity can do, and that's the story I'm telling in that podcast.
That's a good one. So my story is not that dramatic, but basically, and what I say it in my intros, people really never made sense to me as a kid. It was as if everyone had been given a book explaining the codes, and it was like everyone spoke in code, so it never really made sense, which was a challenge, but it got me paying much closer attention to people than most others do. Mm-hmm. And so I'll notice things about the way people react, or, change the way they react to things that other people just don't see because they're so used to understanding it. And for me, I have to pay attention all the time. Yeah.
So one person I talked to actually wrote that book because he's like, there's obviously a code of rules people are following. I just don't know it. And so he sat down and like paid attention and took notes and then wrote it. And now when he coaches people, he'd be like, this is the book of human behavior that nobody wants you to have and nobody wants to believe exists. But here it is. This is the rule book. And there's someone else I interviewed who's a marketing expert. He writes copy. So his job, he has autism. His job is to persuade people, is to get inside their heads, get inside their decision loops, and then influence it, which doesn't sound like something that would naturally fit with autism.
Right.
But he basically A/B tested human relations because he couldn't. So most people take things for granted. You just kind of know, okay, you should stop talking now, or you should, back off, or you should lean in, or whatever. And so we don't, if you say, why did you stop talking at that moment? I don't know. It was just the right time to stop. You don't know. He didn't know any of this. He had to figure it out. So he'd be like, okay, last time I said 4 sentences and they got mad. So let me try 1 sentence. All right, that lost their attention. All right, let me try 2 sentences. Ooh, that got a good result. So he would actually, after a social interaction, he'd take mental notes of what worked and what didn't work, and then try a different strategy. So he'd then get into the situation again and say, well, this strategy, strategy number 17 didn't work. Strategy number 18 got me slapped. But strategy number 13 seemed to have promised, let's iterate that to 13A. Oh, well, that's a good one. And so now he can lean on all that when he writes copy and he creates marketing material to be very powerful converting material because he knows how people think at a very granular level that most people don't think about.
That's fantastic. I want to read that book, those books. So we need to start getting wrapped up. But one last question before I ask you my 3 standard questions is, when you were networking with all of these people, you must have run across people who are wildly different than yourself. What were some things you learned about communicating well with people who think very differently than you?
The biggest thing that I've learned is to, and I learned this actually more from doing sales, is the polite nod. So in sales, you don't want to disagree with someone. And so you want to be a blank canvas of what they love. So I'd have people start saying, conspiracy theories, crazy, extreme political views, whatever. I don't care what your political views are as long as you buy the damn insurance. So someone would be going on, and they'd be like, you know what I'm talking about, right? And I'd be like, I do understand what you're saying.
The words make sense.
English, and I can certainly parse the words. So yes, I totally know what you're talking about, which they take to mean I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And by being forced to keep my mouth shut and listen to their opinions, I could actually learn, they believe this because of that. They have this life experience. They're getting their information from this place. They watch, this information source or this cable news channel or this social media. And I got to understand the depth. So the really powerful thing is curiosity, authentic curiosity. Mm-hmm. Not just like, how's your weekend? You got any plans for the weekend? Because I want to get you talking. But I want to understand your life. I want to know what it is like to be you. I want to know because I'm honestly curious. Now, the more I know about what it's like to be you, the more I'm going to identify a problem I can solve with the thing I sell, and the more money I'm going to make. That's also good. But before that, it's not a means to an end. I'm just curious. Why do you think that? Who are you? Where does this come from? So if you approach everything with curiosity as opposed to fear and like, you're different than me, you're threatening me. Instead be like, wow, you're really different. That's really interesting. Why do you think that? Where did you get that from? And if you approach it that way, then no one's really that different from you. Because when you dig down to the core, we're all the same. You're rarely going to meet someone who's like, well, actually, I hate America and want everyone to suffer. Someone with complete opposite views, they still love their country. They love their children. They love their community. They just think the way to serve their country and their children and community is this other thing than you think.
Right.
So if you can get to that common core at the center, then you discover you're similar, and then you can start building that common ground out from there and find the areas where you have those common agreements.
I love that. I love curiosity, and what I've found is kids are so great to deal with because they tend to be so curious. Mm-hmm. Most adults have lost it, and it makes most adults boring, in my opinion.
Yep,
so
that's true.
Curiosity is what's what makes them interesting to me. All right, to wrap up, I'm going to ask you the 3 questions I ask everyone. What is a place that you have visited and loved, and a place that you would love to visit?
A place that I've visited and loved. So I've actually gotten to travel a lot more in the last 3 years than I did in the previous 8 or 10. I have not been to many of the great travel locations because my life has not afforded me the chance to travel for fun. But what I enjoy is traveling to events. And honestly, it doesn't really matter where, because a hotel ballroom is a hotel ballroom, wherever you put it. But I really enjoyed. I went to the San Francisco Bay Area recently, which is a really, really cool area in Benicia, California. There's this mile-long downtown area, which is really nice.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, really, I took a road trip to Los Angeles when I was in college from Massachusetts, and what was fascinating wasn't the sights. I mean, we stopped at the St. Louis Arch and places like that, but it was just the common things. Stopping at a rest stop in Texas, and the fact that it looked so similar to a rest stop in Massachusetts, and realizing just how similar things were. Yeah, there's slight flavor differences and slight accent differences, but just how much in common there was. And so, the next trip I'm really excited to is Cincinnati, exotic destination. I'm driving there in a couple weeks because I'm supporting running an event. And I love the road. So
Great.
the idea of being on the road for 12 hours is super fun.
I've actually heard surprisingly good things about Cincinnati. I think it has come a long way. There are now a lot of great restaurants, but I like the fact that you don't necessarily care where it is as long as the experience you have there. That's great.
Yep.
Can you give me someone who you think is a great communicator, and it can be either in your personal life or a public figure?
So I was thinking about this one, and the two who I would say compete for it in my mind are Gary Vaynerchuk and Alex Hormozi. I recently discovered Alex Hormozi, but I think more people know Gary Vaynerchuk. Alex Hormozi really impresses me because his way of communicating is very impressive. It's clearly very practiced, because the way he's approached business has been very scientific, and I've actually learned a lot by how he did his book launch and presentation. But what I like about his style is it very much has the sense of he's trying to mentor the world. You get the feeling of like he's been there and now he wants to make sure that you have that good experience and that you're not struggling and suffering and you can take care of your family, and you get the feeling that he really cares, and I don't get the sense that he's got enough guile to lie to the world. And that, and the fact that most people watching, he has nothing to sell them. So that's the other reason it makes me think he's honest about it. But it just has this sincerity of, I know something, I want you to know it. And by the way, if you know it, that's going to make me more money because you need to get to this level for me to be able to partner with you. And until then, you can't do anything for me. So please learn from me. I want to help. And that's what really, it's that kind of authenticity and openness that really impresses me.
Wonderful. Pay it forward and make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And the last question is, what is one piece of communication advice that everyone can benefit from?
Approach every conversation with the goal of serving. And if you want to be goal-oriented, with the goal of solving a problem. Because if you approach every conversation looking to serve or solve a problem or provide benefit to the other person, then it takes all the pressure off making sure that you got your good elevator pitch or you get your point across. If you're trying to help them, then the more you're talking, the more you're working against your objectives. And the more you help them, the more they want to help you. And once you've created that dynamic, you'll have all the time in the world to tell your story and elevator pitch, and because they're going to be like, you've done this for me. What can I do for you? I've got to reciprocate. How can I help? Then you've got plenty of time to tell them all about what you do and your value proposition and blah, 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 blah. So approach every conversation with the goal of solving a problem. And if you're sincere about that, then that is how you make it so everyone loves you, and then they'll forgive all kinds of foibles.
I'm sensing a common theme here. I like it. All right, Michael, how can people reach out and find you or learn more about you?
So my website is guywhoknowsaguy.com. There is no there is no A before that. It is just guywhoknowsaguy.com. And if they go there, then they will find all kinds of stuff, including information about JV Connect, which My goal is it'll be the most powerful and impactful networking event ever put on the internet.
And it's going to be on the internet. When is that?
The next one, the first one, is December 12th to 14th, and after that they will be quarterly. So if you're watching this after December 14th, 2023, then still go there, because there'll be one in March, one in June, one in September? Yeah. 3, 6, 9, 12. Every
It's
3
all
months there will be one. So
Perfect. Well, I encourage everyone to check that out. And Michael, it has been a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
it's been great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of How to Talk to Weirdos. I really appreciate you being here. Please reach out to me on my LinkedIn, which is Jeremy Doran Speaks, or find me on my webpage, jeremydoranspeaks.com. I want to hear from you. I would love some feedback. Tell me what you think, and tell me what you want me to talk about next. Until next week, enjoy talking to some weirdos.